In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. By the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, one with Luisa, the little daughter of the Divine Will, I enter into the holy divine will. Come, divine will, come beat in my every heartbeat. Come breathe in my every breath. Come pray, adore, and reign in me. In the name of everyone and everything, past, present, and future. In, with, through, and for Jesus, Mary, and Luisa. In, with, and for all, that all may be for the glory of God and the good of all souls, giving to God as if all lived in the most holy divine will, united with creation, redemption, and sanctification, praying as one in that one eternal act, for the kingdom to come, reign on earth. Fiat. The kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures. Book of Heaven. The call of the creature to the order, the place, and the purpose for which he was created by God. Volume 30, Part 1. JMJ. In voluntate Dei. Deo gratias. November 4th, 1931. How confidence forms the arms and the feet of the soul. How God continues the work of creation in the soul who does his will. The divine will, cement of the human will. My Jesus, center and life of my little soul, my littleness is such that I feel the extreme need for you, my love, to hold me tightly in your arms and be moved to pity for my great weakness. I am tiny, and you know that the little ones have need of swaddling clothes to strengthen their members, and of the milk of their mamma in order to be nourished and grow. And I feel the intense need for you to swaddle me with the swaddling clothes of love, and clasping me to your divine breast, give me the milk of your divine will for food, to nourish me and make me grow. Here, O Jesus, I feel the need of your life in order to live. I want to live of you. And then you will be writing, not I, and you will be able to write what you want, and the way you want it. Therefore the task is yours, not mine. I will only lend you my hand, and you shall do all the rest. Let us make this agreement, O Jesus. Then, abandoning myself in the arms of Jesus, I heard his most sweet voice whispering to my ear, saying to me, "My little daughter, the more you remain abandoned in me, the more you shall feel my life in you, and I shall take the place of primary life in your soul. Know that true confidence in me forms the arms of the soul, and the feet, in order to climb up to me and clasp me so tightly that I cannot unbind myself from her. So one who has no confidence, has no arms nor feet, she is a poor cripple. And therefore your confidence will be your victory over me, and I shall hold you tightly in my arms, attached to my breast, to give you the continuous milk of my divine will. Now, you must know that each time the soul does my will, I recognize myself in the creature. I recognize my works, my steps, my words, my love. It happens that the Creator recognizes himself and his works in the creature, and the creature, in operating, projects herself in the Creator and recognizes herself in him. This recognizing themselves in each other, God and the soul, calls for the first act of creation, and God goes out of his rest and continues the work of creation with this creature who lives and operates in my will. In fact, our work did not end. There was only a pause of rest. And the creature, by doing our will, calls us to work. But sweet call, because for us, work is new happiness, new joys, and prodigious conquests. So we do nothing other than continue our outpourings of love, of power, of goodness, and of unreachable wisdom, which gave the start in creation. And the creature feels that her God does not rest for her, but continues the labor of his creative work. And as she operates in our will, she feels, starting over her soul, the reign of the operating love of God, his power and wisdom that does not remain idle, but works in her soul. Oh, if you knew the enjoyment, the pleasure we feel when the creature calls us to work. By calling us, she recognizes us. By calling us, she opens the doors to us. She gives us dominion, and she gives us all the freedom to do what we want in her soul. So we shall do a work worthy of our creative hands. Therefore, never let our divine will escape you. If you want our work to be continuous, it shall be your voice-bearer and ours, in which you shall emit your voice to call us, and we shall hear the sweet whispering to our ear, and will immediately descend into our own will within your soul to continue our work. In fact, you must know that the continuous acts form fulfilled life and works. What is not continuous can be called effects of my will, not life that is formed in the creature. And the effects, little by little, vanish away, and one remains on an empty stomach. Therefore, courage and confidence, and always forward, crossing the sea of the divine will. After this I was following the acts that my highest good, Jesus, had done in his humanity when he was on earth. And making himself heard, he added, "My daughter, my human will had no act of life, but rather it was an act of receiving the continuous act of my divine will, which I, as word of the celestial Father, possessed. Therefore, all my acts and pains, prayers, breaths, and heartbeats that I did, as my human will would undergo the life of the divine will, formed many ties to retie the human wills to mine. And since these human wills were like houses, some collapsing, others damaged, and others reduced to ruin, my divine will, operating in my humanity, prepared with my acts the helps to sustain the ones collapsing, to cement the ones damaged, and to raise again upon their very ruins the houses destroyed. I did nothing for myself. I did not have any need. I did everything in order to redo, to rehabilitate the human wills. My only need was love and wanting to be loved back. Now, in order to receive all my helps and all my pains and works as operating works, speaking voice, and helping messengers, the creature must unite her will to mine, and immediately she shall feel herself retied to mine, and all my acts shall offer themselves around to do their offices, in order to sustain, cement, and raise again the human will. As soon as she unites herself and decides to do my divine will, all of my acts, like fierce army, place themselves as defense of the creature, and form the boat of safety in the stormy sea of life. But for one who does not do my will, I could say that she receives nothing, nor can she receive, because my will alone is the outgiver of everything I did for love of creatures. Fiat. November 9th, 1931. How God has the acts of the creature established. Operating and incessant act of the divine will. One who does not do the divine will is left without mother, and remains orphaned and derelict. My abandonment in the divine volition continues. Oh, with what tenderness it awaits me on its maternal lap, to say to me, "Daughter of my will, never leave me alone. Your mamma wants you together with her. I want your company in the incessant work that I do for all creatures. I do everything for them. I do not leave them for one instant, because if I left them, they would lose life. Yet there are those who do not recognize me. Even more, they offend me, while I am all for them. Oh, how hard is loneliness! This is why I long for you, my daughter. Oh, how dear to me is your company in my acts. Company renders the work sweet. It empties it of its weight, and is the bearer of new joys. But while my mind was wandering in the divine will, my always lovable Jesus, making me his little visit, told me, "My daughter, my will is untiring, wanting to maintain the life, the order, the balance of all generations, and of the entire universe. It cannot, nor does it want to cease its work. More so, since each motion is as though given birth by it, and bound with inseparable bonds. An image of it is the air, which, while no one sees it, yet gives birth to the breath in the creatures, and is inseparable from the human respiration. Oh, if the air ceased its work of letting itself be breathed, the life of all creatures would suddenly cease. My will is more than air. The air is nothing other than the symbol, the image, and it produces the life of the respiration from the vital virtue of my divine will. While my will is life in itself and uncreated. Now, God has all the acts of creatures, and the number of their acts established. So the commitment of these acts, because they are established by God, is taken by my divine will. It orders them, and it places its life in them. But who gives the fulfillment to these acts established by the Supreme Being? One who cooperates with them and lets herself be dominated by the divine will. With the cooperation and with its dominion, she feels the bond and the inseparability from it, and feels its divine life flow in her acts. On the other hand, when she does not cooperate, she loses the dominion of my divine will, and instead of doing mine, she does her will. And each act of human will forms a void for the divine in the soul. These voids disfigure the poor creature, and since she was made for God, He alone can fill these voids, because the acts, established in their number, were to serve to fill her with the divine being. Oh, how horrible are these voids! In them appear crooked ways, acts without divine origin and without life. Therefore, there is nothing that ruins the creature more than her will. So my will is operating an incessant act inside and outside of the creature. But who receives its operative act? One who recognizes it in all her acts. One who recognizes it, loves it, esteems it, appreciates it. By being recognized, my will makes one touch with one's own hand its operative and incessant act, and the creature feels its arms in hers, the power of its motion in hers, its vivifying virtue in her breath, the formation of its life in the beating of her heart. Everywhere, from inside, from outside, she feels herself being vivified, touched, embraced, kissed by my will. And my will, as it sees that the creature feels its loving embraces, clasps her more to its divine breast, and keeps forming its sweet chains of inseparability between itself and its beloved creature. By being recognized, it feels as though repaid of its incessant work, and with its power, it removes the veil that kept it hidden from the creature, and it makes her know who it is that forms the life of all her acts. Therefore, the more you shall recognize it, the more you shall feel how much it loves you, and you shall love it more. In addition to this, you must know that the soul without my divine will is like a flower that is picked from the plant. Poor flower, they took its life away, because it is no longer bound to the root, and attached It no longer receives the vital humors which circulated like blood and kept it alive, fresh, beautiful, fragrant, because it has lost the root which, like mother, loved it, nourished it, and kept it clasped to its breast. And while the root remains under the earth, as though buried alive, to give life to the flowers, its children, and to let them make a beautiful appearance, so much so as to draw the human attention with its sweet enchantment. However, as the flower is picked from the plant, as if it had lost its mother, it seems to assume an attitude of melancholy. It loses its freshness, and it ends up withering. Such is the soul without my divine will. She detaches herself from the divine root, which more than mother loved her, nourished her, and while it lives as though buried, it lives in all her acts, and in the depth of her soul, to administer to her the divine humors which it makes circulate like blood in all her acts, in order to maintain her fresh, beautiful, perfumed by its divine virtues, so much so as to form the most beautiful and sweet enchantment for the earth and for the whole of heaven. So, as she detaches herself from my divine will, she loses her true mamma, who with many maternal cares kept her safe, held her tightly to her breast, defended her from everyone and from everything. And she ends up becoming disfigured and withering to all that is good. And these souls come to feel the sad melancholy, for they live without she who generated them, without life, without the caresses of their mamma. So they can be called poor, derelict orphans, without custody, and maybe in the hands of enemies, and tyrannized by the passions of their own self. Oh, if the root had reason, how many harrowing cries of sorrow would it not emit in seeing the life of its flowers being snatched away, and itself being forced, like sterile mother, to remain without the crown of its children. But if the plant does not cry, my will cries in seeing so many of its children orphaned, but voluntary orphans, who feel all the pains of orphanhood, while their mother lives, and does nothing but sadly miss and call the crown of her children around herself. Fiat. November 16th, 1931. Each human act is a game, a pledge, in order to win the celestial graces. The human act is soil in which the divine will sows its seed. How love constitutes a right. I feel myself prey to the divine will, yet not forced, but voluntary. And I feel the intense need to make a prey for myself too, that would render me happy in time and eternity. And therefore in all my acts I try to make a prey of the light of the divine will, of its sanctity, of its very life. So I call it, I press it, to capture it in my acts, to enclose it in them and be able to say, Each act of mine is a prey and a conquest that I make. Prey and conquest of divine will. More so, since it having preyed mine, without a will I cannot live. Therefore it is fair and a right for me to make a prey of its own. And in this preying of each other, it seems to me that we maintain the correspondence, the game, and the love of both sides ignites more. Now, while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus seemed to be pleased in hearing my nonsense, and I said to myself, after all, I am little and just newly born. If I speak nonsense, it is not a big deal, but rather one is to make allowances for me, because the little ones are prone to speak nonsense. And many times dear Jesus delights in the nonsense spoken out of pure love, and he takes the occasion to give a little lesson, as in fact he did. Visiting my little soul, he told me, "My little daughter of my will, indeed everything that passes between the Creator and the creature, the acts that she does, and what she receives from God, serve to maintain the correspondence, for them to know each other more, so as to love each other more, and to keep up the game between each other, to obtain the intent of what God wants from the creature, and of what she wants from God. So each act is a game that is prepared to obtain the most beautiful victories and make a prey of each other. The act serves as material in order to play, and as pledge in order to have something to give to the winner. God, by giving, puts in his pledge. The creature, by doing her act, puts in her own, and they set up the game. And our goodness is so great that we make ourselves weak, so as to let the creature win. Other times we make ourselves strong, and we win. And this we do in order to keep her on her toes, so that, by doing more acts, she may put in more pledges, and so she may be able to win, to make up for the defeat. After all, how could the union be maintained if we were to give nothing, and the creature were to give us nothing? See, then, each act is a committing of ourselves to give greater graces, and a correspondence that you open between heaven and earth, and a game in which you call your Creator to be with you. More so, since each act done by the divine will in the act of the creature is a divine seed that germinates in her. The act prepares the soil in which my will sows its seed, to make it germinate into a divine plant. In fact, according to the seed that is sown into the womb of the earth, that is the plant that is born. If the seed is of flowers, the flower is born. If the seed is of fruit, the fruit is born. Now, my divine will sows a distinct seed in each active creature. In some, it sows the seed of sanctity. In some, the seed of love. In others, the seed of goodness, and so forth. The more acts she does in it, the more soil she prepares, in which my will prepares its distinct seed, to fill the earth with these human acts. So, one who lets herself be dominated by my divine will is beautiful, is striking. Each of her acts, containing the variety of the divine seeds, is a note of her Creator. One act says sanctity, another mercy, others justice, wisdom, beauty, love. In some, a divine harmony appears, with such order that it shows the finger of God operating in her. Do you see, then, the necessity of the act of the creature in order for us to be able to find the soil in which to enclose our divine seed? Otherwise, where to sow it? As for us, we have no soil, therefore she must form it for us with her acts, so that, with our seeds, we may germinate the divine being in the creature. Therefore, one who does and lives in our divine will can be called the one who reproduces her Creator and hosts within herself the one who created her. Then I continued my acts in the divine volition, and my littleness wanted to embrace everything in my embrace of love, to be able to make my little love run in all things and everywhere. But while I was doing this, my sweet Jesus added, "My daughter, to love means to possess, and wanting to make the beloved person or object one's own. To love means bond, whether of friendship or of kinship or of sonship, according to the greater or lesser intensity of the love. So, if between the creature and God there is no void of divine love, if all his acts run toward God to love him, if they have their origin in love, and in love they end, if he looks at all things that belong to the Supreme Being as his own, this says love of son toward his Father, because in this way one does not go out either of the divine properties or of the house of the Celestial Father. In fact, true love constitutes a right in the creature, right of sonship, right of participation in the goods, right to be loved. Each of his acts of love is a vibrating note that palpitates in the divine heart, and with its sound it says, "I love you. Love me." And the sound does not cease if he does not hear the note of his Creator, that echoing the sound of the soul answers to him, "I love you, O Son." Oh, how we await the "I love you" of the creature, to let him take his place in our love, to have the sweet pleasure of being able to say to him, "I love you, O Son," and so be able to give him a greater right to love us and to belong to our family. A broken love, and one that does not make our things its own, nor does it defend them, cannot be called love of son. At most, it can be love of friendship, love of circumstance, love of interest, love of necessity, which does not constitute a right, because only sons have the right to possess the goods of the Father, and the Father has the sacrosanct duty, even by divine and human laws, to make his children possess his goods. Therefore, love always, so that you may find in all your acts the love, the encounter, the kiss of your Creator. Fiat. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 30, Part 1. Fiat. Dearest Lord Jesus, I thank you for your lessons of today. Free me from living one single instant outside of your will. Have pity on me and do not permit that I either know or acquire any other life except that of your divine will. Fiat et Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.